I recently posted a video on my Facebook page of a piece that was kind of layered and chippy, and it's had some very negative comments, to say the least. Some of them are actually quite rude. However, that's not going to put me off, because this piece is going to be a special dedication to all the people that left hate comments on that video, and this piece is going to be mega chippy. So I've just got back from Germany, where I was really kindly invited by Vanessa from Simply Vintage to demo some of my techniques that I do on furniture, and I decided to do the technique where I applied paint with a wooden block because the video did really well on my YouTube channel and I really enjoyed doing it. So this piece behind is going to get the same treatment, but I'm going to go and show you my inspo. I'm just going to pause the video and I'll be back in a mo. I'm here. So this is a mirror out of my bathroom. It's a genuinely old mirror and I love the finish of it. It's just really chippy and old, and there's a lot of the wood on show, which I really like, and then just these pops of blue. And this colour wood is very similar colour to the piece of furniture that I've got behind, and I just think that look will look really cool on these because these are not perfect. They have splits down the side of them in the wood. It's a very kind of rustic style as it is, so to try and paint these in a perfect finish would require loads and loads of work, and it's also going against the original style of the furniture, and that's not what I like to do. I like to kind of work with the furniture in the style that it was intended to be originally. So I'm going to try and recreate this look on the mirror on these drawers here using a wooden block. Can't find my white lightning cleaner. It's right in front of me. So the first thing I'm going to need to do to these is to establish whether there's wax on them or not. And the easy way to do that is to just get your fingernail and scratch the surface of the piece. If there's wax on it, you'll get a build-up of wax underneath your fingernail. This hasn't got wax on it, so we're good to clean. If your piece has got wax on it, you might need to strip that. I'll link a video here of me showing you how to strip wax off a piece of furniture, because water-based paints generally don't stick over wax. So it's always a good idea to remove wax if it is on the surface, because it could cause you issues further down. This piece isn't wax, so I can go straight ahead and clean. I've got Dixie Belle's White Lightning and water mixed in this bottle. Dixie Belle's White Lightning is a granulated cleaner that comes in a pot and you dilute it to create your own cleaning solution. It's degreasing and deglossing, which is very important for this piece because I'm not going to sand. So this cleaning product is going to remove anything that's on the surface in terms of grease, grime, oil, anything like a silicone-based polish that might resist our paint. This cuts through it and cleans it completely off. I use a microfiber cloth to do the majority of my cleaning because they are relatively cheap and you can reuse them. I rinse it out, and then once it's nice and clean, like so, I just go back in and that removes all of the cleaning solution from the surface. When you've got to this stage, you might notice your cloth's still looking a little bit brown, and if you've done a couple of cleans and it's still looking brown, you might have problems with bleed through. I'm not going to treat this for bleed through because I'm going to embrace all the rusticness, the bleed through, and make it look really old, hopefully. But if you want to prevent bleed through, that's when you need one of Dixie Belle's problem solvers, and it's a very good product. It's called Bond Emboss. It comes in 3 colours. You can get it in clear, white and grey, because a lot of people think, well, if I'm doing a really distressed look, I don't want to use a primer because you're going to be able to see it and I'm not going to be able to see the wood underneath. But Dixie Belle do a clear version, so you could paint this with Bond Emboss in clear and you could still get that kind of distressed look with the wood coming through. Like I say, I'm not going to use it in this instance because I'm not going to sand. Sanding sometimes aggravates the kind of bleed through process. I'm not sanding, and also I'm going to be kind of embracing the bleed through if there is any, and I'm also going to be adding loads of brown wax at the end, so I'm kind of going for that look. But if you wanted to, you could prime at this stage with Dixie Belle's Clear Bond Emboss and that's going to stop you getting any bleed through issues. Down on the floor, I'm going to mix a colour using 2 Dixie Belle chalk mineral paint shades. You can guess what the colours are from my hand. I'm going to try and get it as close as I can to this blue, and I see mainly Peacock, but possibly a little bit lighter. So that's Peacock. It's a full tub, so I'm not going to tip it up because I've done that before and it's ended up all over the floor. It's that, but then possibly a little bit lighter. So I'm going to use Dixie Belle Blue to lighten it, and I just want to talk for a second, if I may, about this colour, because Dixie Belle have partnered with North Shore Animal League America, which is the largest no-kill animal rescue in the US. And for every Dixie Belle Blue sold, as well as some other limited edition stencils and decoupage paper, which I'm not going to use on this piece, but I have used in other content if you want to go and have a look at that, they're going to donate $1 to North Shore Animal Rescue. So I'm using this colour, and I'm probably going to do another piece using just this colour because it is really pretty. So I just thought I'd tell you a little bit about that for now. Thank you for listening. So I'm actually going to start with the lightest colour because I can quite easily add Peacock to this to darken it. But if you start with a darker colour and then try and lighten it, you will end up using a lot more paint because darker colours are more dominant than lighter colours. So I'm actually going to start using Dixie Belle Blue first, and I'm going to put it on a paper plate because I need to be able to put my block in here in order to get it on. So I usually use a flattish surface to mix my colours when I'm using a wooden block. So I'm just going to add a good amount of Dixie Belle Blue, and then I'm going to have a little bit of Peacock just splodged in. And this is why I am the way I am, because I just let paint drip down the tubs. Don't do that, clean it up. I'm just going to put the lid on it. And then I'm going to mix it first to make sure I'm kind of on the right tracks with the blue. I can add Peacock into this, like I say, to darken it. But if I went too dark too soon, it's going to take a heck of a lot of the lighter colour to get it back to a lighter shade, if that makes sense. Still looking a little bit light, so I'm going to put some Peacock in and get it a little bit darker. So I reckon that's about there, more or less. I'm not trying to match it exactly, but it's definitely along the right tracks. The other thing that I'm going to do to this piece, which differs to the piece that I did last time, which I painted with a wooden block, is to add some sea spray into the paint. So this is a texture additive, and it's a powder that you can put in your paint, and it makes your paint thicker and a little bit grittier so that you can achieve lots of different looks with it. You can achieve distressed looks, beachy looks, chippy looks, loads of different things, and I've got loads of videos on my YouTube channel using this product because I use it all the time. This is a big old bag, but Dixie Belle do sell it in a smaller tub as well if you didn't need quite as much, but I use it all the time, so that's why I've got one of these. And a little goes a long way. I say that every time I use it, and every time I use it I end up putting too much in. So I'm not going to do that this time because I don't want this too thick to the point where it's going to start drying up on my plate. So I'm going to start with that much in the scoop. That's probably less than 1/4 of a scoop, I'd say. It's hardly anything at all. Again, same applies to this product. You can add more, but once it's mixed in your paint, you can't take it out. So you have to add more paint to make it thinner, and then you'll end up using way more product than what you would have originally. I've been there, I've done it, I know. So you just plop it in your paint and then mix it up. And it just mixes in to your paint to give you that slightly thicker texture. So it's all mixed in, but as you can see, it's slightly grittier and thicker than what it is normally. The more powder you will put in your paint, the thicker the product's going to be. You can actually make this into almost like a paste consistency if you want it really, really thick, but it just depends on the outcome of the look that you want. I just want something that's slightly thicker for this look, not too thick. And also be warned that it does make your paint dry in your container or on your plate a lot quicker. So if you are needing a lot of paint to do a big area, maybe mix smaller quantities at a time so that your paint doesn't go off and you end up wasting product. I'm also going to put the lid back on my paints because I know what will happen. I'll end up sitting in it or treading in it. I've already made a mess and put Peacock all over the floor. So let's do that in the interest of safety. We're back up here and I've got my wooden block ready to apply my paint, and it's worth knowing that the block is obviously going to alter how your paint looks on the surface. A little bit like if you were to use different shape brushes or brushes made out of different bristles, you can get different effects. The same applies to this. So this is quite a small block. The wooden block that I used on my other video was a little bit different. And also, what I will say that is if you are really going for that kind of really rustic distressed look, which I am, try and get a piece of wood that isn't perfect. This piece here, this side is quite smooth, and that's obviously going to apply my paint a lot kind of smoother and more consistent than this side, which has got like a knot in it or some inconsistency where the wood has been sawed. This has actually come from my garden gate that's just been fitted, a new garden gate. So I nabbed this ready to apply the paint. So that bit's got some nice kind of bits of texture on, and that's gonna give me more kind of distressed, imperfect kind of variation to my paint going on the surface. So all I do is just make sure that I've got quite a decent amount of paint on the wooden block, but not too much. Obviously that's going to cause lots of paint to kind of run and drip. Just a nice kind of even coat on the side of the wooden block. If you're unsure about how much to add, or if this is something that you've never tried and want to give it a go, try it on a piece of scrap wood first, just so that you can get a feel for how the paint is going to apply. That might be a little bit too kind of rough. I'm going to try the other side. So as I mentioned, not all wood is going to apply paint in the same way. It really depends on the surface of that wooden block, and it also depends on the surface of your furniture. Now, this piece is quite rustic. It does have some dints, some knocks, bangs, ridges, and some imperfections, which obviously is going to be picked up. If you were applying a brush over that, the bristles sit nicely in all of those imperfections and give you that nice even coat. Whereas a wooden block is obviously a rigid surface, so where it, you know, maybe there's a ding, the paint misses, and that's the kind of beauty of this kind of technique. I'm going to go and get another piece of wood out of my woodshed just so that I can get in on the drawers, because that piece of wood is too big to fit on here. So I need more of kind of like a smaller one for the drawer fronts. So be right back. Okay, I found this piece. It's too long that way, but that might work on the sides because the sides are obviously long and flat. But I think I might be able to use this side for getting on the drawers. There's absolutely no problem using several different pieces of wood to get different kind of effects on the surface. So the huge kind of blocky chunky piece that I used at the start was fine for the bigger areas, but it just wasn't getting on the drawers. I just couldn't get it into the drawers on the, especially at the top, because obviously it's a graduated set, so they're smaller at the top. So that kind of smaller piece on its end was perfect to get in the corners and the smaller drawers. Also, it's important not to kind of obsess where the paint is going, because you kind of want this to look loose and organic. You don't want it to look kind of too precise. Be prepared to get covered in paint with this effect. Well, if you're anything like me, you will anyway. So once that initial layer of the first coat of paint had gone on, I went back in and kind of just refined the areas of where the paint was, because if you saw at the very beginning of this clip, I'd kind of just whacked a load of paint either side of the handle, and it was looking a bit kind of samey, so I just went in and made it look a little bit more random. So in some drawers you'll find a lot more paint than on others. I also just made sure that it didn't look too even. I don't want any symmetry on this. I don't want it to all look kind of the same. I just want it to flow and look naturally aged. The sides have no detail on at all, so I used the larger side of the bigger piece of wood and just kind of made sure that it looked a little bit random and not too kind of contrived, and made sure I moved my stick in lots of different directions. Sometimes as the paint is drying, I like to fiddle with it. Now obviously when you're trying to get a smooth finish, that's the worst thing you can do, but as it's drying, if you drag something through it, it can kind of create lots more interesting texture. I'm not going to use wood because what that'll do is probably drag the paint off. I don't want to remove paint. I just kind of want to smooth some areas out and create a little bit of different texture as opposed to it all being the same. So I'm going to use this. This is a thing. It's actually called a Thingamajig. That's the official name, and it's a kind of bendy rubbery thing, and it's got lots of different sides. That one's pointy, that one's a little bit less pointy, and if you hold it quite loosely and drag it through paint, it creates lots of different texture. So it's just going to give me more variation in my texture basically, and anywhere where the paint might have dripped, so oh, you can't see that. So here, there's a big drip of paint. I mean, I could sand it off if it dried, worst case scenario, but I'm just going to drag that tool through there. And also, I'm obviously going to paint over the handles, you know, just because I don't get enough hate comments online already, I thought I'd paint over the hardware just to get a few more. But also, it can be a little bit easier to add the paint over the hardware with this rather than with the wood. Obviously the wood's quite clumsy, but this is a bit smaller, so if you did want to add any more detail, this is a good bit of kit. Now if using wood scares you, or if you can't get wood, or if you don't like the idea of using a wooden block to apply paint but you want a kind of similar finish, you can actually use the Thingamajig tool to get a very similar result to the look that I'm achieving. I just like to use it for a little bit more finer detail. I look like a smurf. I think I've got it where I'm happy with all the different marks and the level of paint versus wood on the piece. So because it's applied really thickly, you do have to bear in mind that this is probably going to take longer to dry. It will take longer to dry than if you were just applying a coat of paint with a paintbrush or a roller. So I'm going to actually leave this to dry overnight. It's nearly 3 o'clock, so I've got to go and pick the kids up from school anyway. So I'll leave it to dry overnight and make sure it's hard, and then I'll come back tomorrow and finish it off. Hello, so it's the next day and this is completely dried. Obviously it's been left to dry overnight, and now we need to make it look old, because at the minute it looks very new and a little bit terrifying, I'm not gonna lie, but we need to make it look old, and this is when it becomes something a little bit terrifying to hopefully something that's a little bit more convincing. So as you can see here, this paint is actually very smooth. Although there is texture in it, it's very smooth and worn down. It looks like paint that has been worn down over years. That's what we need to do to this now. So I've got a scraper. Now, this is a very blunt scraper, and there's a reason for that, because I don't want to scrape the paint off. If a little bit chips off, that's absolutely fine. But I don't want to scrape the paint off. I want to kind of smooth it out, get rid of any really kind of spiky, textury bits, and just basically make it look like this. So I'm going to start with this and see how we go. And then I might get some sandpaper on it and see if we can just kind of knock it back a little bit and just give it that kind of aged look. Let's bring you a little bit closer. Can I just say as well, this is absolute testament to how tough and durable Dixie Belle's chalk mineral paint is. Bearing in mind, I didn't sand this piece underneath, I've just given it a really good clean, and I don't like this bit here. This bit is annoying me, and I wanted to take some of the blue off. I've just been really heavily scratching it with this and it isn't coming off at all. So I'm going to see if I can get a slightly sharper scraper. I'm not going to use my carbide scrapers because they are too sharp. They will literally remove anything. They'd probably take your skin off. They would take your skin off. But as you can see, that's a metal scraper. Yes, it's blunt, but it's still a metal object onto an unsealed chalk mineral paint. And I'm actually pressing on really hard and it's not coming off. So that is testament to how durable this paint really is. It's not even coming off with that one, and that one is a newer, sharper scraper. Sandpaper. I'm going to start with this. This is an old 120 grit sanding sheet from my electric sander that I'm going to put on a block. The reason I put it on a block is because it stops you having any kind of pressure points on. If I just did it with my fingers, obviously I can press on harder and I can dig in and gouge out some of the paint, and I don't want that. I kind of want a really nice kind of soft, worn look. So I'm going to put it on here and that's going to apply even pressure to the surface. Okay, so that's kind of softened up that bit there that was quite scratchy and I didn't really like it. And it's turned it, it's very nice and soft to touch now. There is still some texture in the paint, which is absolutely fine, that's what I want. But it has kind of just softened and aged that kind of look. So it's gone from looking a little bit kind of forced and not really aged, like these pieces here that I haven't touched. And now it's a little bit more organic and a little bit softer. And then what I like to do after I've kind of distressed it to the point where I'm happy is just get a Dixie Belle sanding sponge, and these are equivalent to a 220 grit. Again, they're nice and spongy so you don't apply too much pressure onto your surface, and I just give it a final kind of rub over with this. And that makes it really nice and smooth. So I just followed that process. I started out with the scraper just to knock the sort of higher pieces of texture back. Then I went in with sandpaper to refine it, and then finished with a sanding sponge. Handle's fallen off. That's okay. We can put it back on in a second. It's actually going to make it easier for me to distress around the handle anyway. So it's all good. More handle has fallen off. And this is another reason I didn't sand before applying the paint, because can you see on the close-up here, there are kind of some tonal differences now where I've started sanding. So where I've started sanding heavier, the original dark varnish has started to lift, and that's exposed a lighter tone of wood underneath, but that gives you some really nice variation. So I've got the lighter wood, the darker wood with the varnish on, and then we've got the kind of blue as well. So it gives you a little bit more tonal variation, because if something was aged naturally, it wouldn't just be the paint finish that was aged, it'd be the finish underneath it as well, whatever that was, whether it was wax, varnish or whatever, that would also be aged. So if that was really consistently sanded all over before me doing this bit, before me applying the paint, when I sanded it back, you would just see the lighter toned wood, because I'd have already taken off the dark varnish. So this way, it gives you a little bit more of that variation underneath the paint. And I know I said I wasn't going to use my carbide scraper, but I'm intrigued. I need to know what it's going to do. So I'm going to try it on a bit that's quite thick, and I'm just going to see. Yeah, it does take quite a lot of the paint off. You can see the shavings here. But if I just use it quite carefully on the areas where the blue paint is thick, it's going to help me get that nice and smooth, like the mirror. I have said this before in other videos that I've done, but I personally believe that if you are doing a really heavily distressed look like this one, it is important to use a variety of different distressing techniques. I think it personally looks a little bit more authentic and convincing if you do so. So with this being a large flat surface, this is the side, by the way. I've just turned it round, but there's no way of showing you the complete side unless I turn the camera around, obviously. So for this, because it is one flat surface, there's no detail on it like there are the drawer fronts. I'm going to use my electric sander on it. This is again a 120 grit, but it's very old, and I've also turned the power down, so it's got about half the power that it normally has on the surface. That way I know I'm not going to take too much paint off all at once. So after I had distressed it and the sides, I decided, by the way, excuse the background noise, next door is attacking their garden. I decided that I needed some more blue on the sides. The sides had less paint than the front. Now obviously this is quite a kind of rough and chippy look, very heavily distressed, but there was too much wood. It just didn't kind of flow right around the sides. So last night, and I didn't film it because I was in my pyjamas and it was quite late, last night I added some more paint around the bottom, slightly more at the kind of a couple of patches in the middle, and then a little bit at the top, and the same on the other side as well. And I feel like that amount of paint is better than what there was. So I'm just going to distress that with my sander. And that's actually outside because I've just been, oh no, it's back in here. Ignore me. I'm actually more efficient at putting things away than what I thought. So I'm going to sand the sides just to give them the kind of same look as the front, and then we can wax it. Okay, we're at the wax stage, and I love using waxes to finish my piece off because, as I mentioned, Dixie Belle chalk mineral paint doesn't actually need to be sealed because it's super durable. So using waxes is absolutely fine, but if you did want to offer slightly more durability, you could also use a clear coat at this stage as well. But I'm going to use wax because that's what I always use. Well, not always, but most of the time. There's a couple of different ways that I usually apply wax depending on the outcome that I want. So clear wax is usually what I use first, and that creates a barrier between your paint and then your coloured waxes, which in this case I'm going to be using brown, and that just helps you control your application of the coloured waxes. Sometimes, if I'm feeling a little bit daring, I will go straight in with the coloured waxes, which is exactly what I'm going to do on this piece because it is heavily distressed. I think it's going to be able to take it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going straight in with Best Damn Wax in brown, and usually when I apply the coloured waxes, I use a brush. When I'm using clear waxes first, I use a sponge. There is no rhyme or reason. I can't tell you why I do that. Also, I feel like a brush is going to help me get in all the kind of nooks and crannies a little bit better, so that's what I'm going to do. Usually, I'll keep a brush for brown wax and a brush for black wax and then wash them every now and again. But I can't find the one for brown wax anywhere. So this has got black wax on it, and we're just going to have to roll with it. So it might tint the brown wax slightly darker, but I'm not concerned about it because this piece is very rustic, so it'll be fine. This brush is called a La Petite brush, and it's a natural bristle brush, which is what is traditionally used to apply wax because it holds onto the wax and distributes it evenly on the surface. Before I do the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 drawers, I'm going to buff the first couple of drawers that I've done because I have done the sides and the top as well. So it's been on for about half an hour, which is about right. There's no hard and fast rule, just don't leave it any less than, I don't know, kind of 20 minutes, just because it needs to kind of start to dry before you remove the excess. So you need a lint-free rag, and then you just need to buff the excess wax. This is when the colour will start reappearing again, the blue colour that I mixed. and it'll buff the excess off, which means it's not going to feel kind of sticky and tacky, and it will give it that nice sheen that you associate with wax. Okay, I'm just going to zoom you out because I wanted to show you the difference between the top 4 drawers. Let's just pop that down, make sure it looks nice. The top 4 drawers, which have had the brown wax on, versus the bottom 5, which haven't had any wax on at all. You can see the massive amount of difference it makes. Now, you might not like that much brown wax on your piece. That is when you would possibly use the clear wax first and then put your coloured wax over the top, because that won't give you as dark a finish. It will give you much more control over the brown wax and be able to kind of pull it off the surface a little bit better, so that it won't be quite as intense as that. But I really like it for this style of piece, so that's how I'm going to keep it. So I'm going to buff the sides and the top because I did those a while ago, and then I'll buff the drawers last that I've just done. But if your rags start to look a little bit like this and they feel like clogged up with the wax, you can actually reuse your rags, because best dang wax is water based, so you can chuck these in the wash and reuse your rags. But also make sure you switch out rags every now and again. Fold them over, find a clean section and buff away, because otherwise you won't be taking the excess off the surface, you'll just be smudging it all around. We're nearly there, we're nearly there. The last thing that I do, which I don't always show in every single video, is I usually, 9 times out of 10, will put Big Mama's Butta on the interior of the drawers. I put my brushes in a bag, and that's because if you leave them out after you've applied Big Mama's Butta, they can go hard, because obviously there's waxes, coconut oil, things like that. So I found that the bristles can go hard. So I just put mine in a bag and it keeps the bristles soft, and I don't wash these brushes, I just use them just for Big Mama's Butta. And I find that works best. But if you did want to wash it, you can use scrubby soap, because there are essential oils in scrubby soap, and oil removes oil. So you don't need a lot of this stuff. A little bit goes a long way. These tubs last me absolutely ages. And as you can see, mine's quite soft today because it's actually really warm in the UK. So I just put a little bit on the brush, and then I just apply it in the drawer interiors. I usually take the drawers out as well. Let's do that. So I do it all in the inside, making sure you get the sides as well. And then I normally take the drawer out and do the sides, the back, the underneath. And I like this brush because it gets in all the corners. And then I normally, if the runners themselves are wood, whatever's left on my brush, I just rub that on the runners and on the inside of the piece as well, because that helps your drawers glide in and out. And then with any wax, as you know, you need to buff. So lint-free rag, buff the excess off, otherwise you're going to be left with a horrible sticky mess, which is not what you want. So I take the excess off, and then shove it back in. As always, I've got some close-ups to show you so that you can see the detail of the finish and how the kind of wax has added that tonal variation to the blue paint, and all the kind of texture and kind of chippy, worn, weathered look. There's a little shot of the side as well, so you can see how that turned out. I just wish I had room for this piece because I absolutely love it, but I don't, so it will be for sale on my website. As always, thank you for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed to the channel, and I will catch you next time. Bye!